Hello and welcome to Inspect, a show about web design and development. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about process, like the design and development process. So going from wireframes to designs and then into development and then finally into production. And basically how that differs between working for a larger company or an agency and also doing that freelance where we sort of handle a lot of that process on your own. How do you want to kick this off?
I think it'll be interesting to find out from yourself how your process works. Let's go with that because you're working for an agency, and and I think the process there differs quite a bit from everyone else's processes, especially if you're freelancing, when you're running your own business. I think there'll be a few steps that make additional steps to the agency model. So let's go through what you do, what your process is, and then.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm part of an agency. So I'm a front end developer in the agency. I'm kind of an unofficial designer as well. I get called upon to do design work every now and then just because of my sort of past experience. But officially, I'm not part of the design team. So we tend to have, I guess, a 3-step process where you have the design team work on obviously the visuals, and then it gets handed over to the front end team handed over to the development team, and we tend to work sort of concurrently, front end and the back end guys, building out the templates and then doing the wiring up and the background, and then obviously it'll then go on to QA and eventually get released. The issue, well, not the issue, but the difference with where I'm working at the moment is that our team is all distributed. So obviously I'm in the UK office, but then we've got offices in Germany, in Croatia, in Austria, and a few other places around Europe. So the teams are very spread out. So we have to communicate. We do all of our communication online, really. So that can sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure that we're using the right tools to sort of to get designs started and get them handed off to the right people. So I think most of our designers are using Sketch to do their design work these days.
Yeah, that's the norm, isn't it? Everyone's kind of using that now.
Yeah, and even when I do design work for the company as well, I'm mainly using Sketch wherever I can, just to sort of be on the same tool set as the actual design team.
Okay.
And then the design team will then work closely with the project managers and the product owners and the client themselves as well to sort of do some requirements gathering at the beginning, work through wireframes and do all that iterative process towards the beginning. And sometimes the developers are involved in those early conversations. Not always. I guess it depends on who's on the team and where their location is. Like most of the projects I've been working on have been clients within the UK, so I've been involved in those conversations from the beginning as well. And that's always helpful because then you can, as a developer, you can sort of help the designers and the design team steer them in the right direction of what's possible and what's not, and what your plan is, and when it comes to developing product.
Yeah,
as well. So it always helps, obviously, when all the team is in the same location. But that's one of the challenges that we tend to face.
So you've got your distributed teams all over, say, Europe or all over the world. So I'm guessing you guys use like a collaboration tool, right? Where you can either, converse and talk about certain aspects of, let's just say, the wireframe, data flow.
Yeah, I mean, we use Slack for most of our projects. There's a couple of projects where the client has their own requirements. So, we may use their own communication tool. So for one of them, we're using Microsoft Teams, which it's obviously the same sort of thing as Slack, really. That the client is bound to use Microsoft just because of licensing. But, internally, we're fairly flexible. Internally within our company, we use Slack. And then for things like design handoff and showing prototypes and things like that, we use mainly InVision, but we're slowly making a bit of a transition towards Zeppelin now. So I've got some projects which are still on InVision, and then anything that's new is kind of going on to Zeppelin as a great tool. So that's pretty good, because then everyone's always everyone's got visibility of everything.
Yeah.
Conversations happen in Slack, they happen in Threads, so everyone's part of the same channel, and there's a history there, and then everyone's got access to the design prototypes as well, so they can see what the mock-ups look like, and they can extract assets from Zeppelin, and the developers can get their colors and fonts and spacing and all that sort of stuff that they need. So that works out pretty well. I think it's important to have the right tools as well with this distributed teams.
Yeah, especially with big teams, larger teams, it's essential.
Yeah, and depending on the size of the project, sometimes if teams are spread out, across different countries, there may be like an initial session where everyone does gather in one place, in one location, and maybe have like a couple of days workshop time, and just sort of flesh out the beginning part of the project, and then everyone can go back to their own desks wherever they're located, and then work remotely after that.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. How does it work for you? I mean, obviously freelance with a couple of like contractor team members. How does the process work for you?
So for me, I mean, when I was freelancing, it's the same now. So I think there's a big distinction between freelancing and being a solopreneur, or running a small agency or a small business. And I think the processes are very similar. So the way I'm working and the way things are handled with me is usually there'll be a meeting with the client to determine what their requirements are, and this is usually for a website or any kind of web project. So we'll find out what they need, what's required, how the website is going to function, what are the main features of the website, and what's the end goal of the website. So, for example, if the website is going to take inquiries for an inquiry form, we need to know about that at the very first step. So, we know about all the moving parts and anything that may cause issues during the development process. So that's usually done through like an initial sort of conversation, and then once that conversation is done, we'll send over like a proposal to the client, which has everything mentioned in black and white, and then they'll basically go through that and agree on everything that we've discussed. And once that's done, then we'll send them an invitation into our project management tool. Usually we use Trello for any kind of project management work.
Okay.
So we have like a external Trello board for myself and the client, and just so myself and the client can see everything that's going on. And then we'll do like an internal one where I'll be using the Trello board with anyone else that's going to be on that project. So that could be anyone from like, a brand designer to someone who's going to be doing development work, or anyone else really that's going to be involved in the project on my side. So,
you have a set formula of how you set up your Trello board as well, like internally and externally?
Yeah, so the external Trello board that I have set up with the client is usually, there's usually like 3 or 4 columns that we set up, and we'll have like a backlog column, and then things that are in progress, and then we'll have another column for completed, and then what we'll do is basically we'll just set up all the tasks individually on individual cards in the backlog column, and assign members onto each card. So the client will be added to anything where they're required to provide any kind of content or feedback. And then once they've provided their actions or carried out what's required of them, then we'll basically tick off the card and move it across into like a completed column, just so they know that what's been completed, and we know what's been completed. But they've got full access to it, so they can actually move stuff back, and we get that quite a lot, where the client will move tasks back into backlog, or important. They'll create an additional column, so they kind of get the hang of it pretty fast.
Okay.
And the flow works pretty well externally. Internally, it's very similar. We might have additional columns to it. We might have notes and other important information where we discuss various things between ourselves rather than emailing back and forth. Conversations will be kept within like a convo sort of column or card within Trello. So that's purely for websites, but we do have digital marketing projects where it works slightly differently. So we'll have columns within Trello which will just mark out the beginning of the week, and so we'll have week commencing, say 1st of June, and then the 7th of June, and then so on and so forth. So then we kind of set up cards which we know are going to be carried out throughout that week. And, we can set up labels for those cards. So we know if anything's green, it's been done. Anything red is important. Orange is being carried out. And if it's not completed during that week, then that card is carried over to the following week. And, we get a lot of that as well. So a lot of cards get carried over from week to week.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of, longer scale where we're doing like maybe a 3-month Google Ads campaign or a 6-month SEO campaign for a client.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, when you've got clients on the same Trello board, and like you said, they've got access to move cards around, do you find that you have to be quite strict with what gets added, or do you almost give them a bit of freedom to add whatever they want to the backlog? Because I can imagine you probably get a bit of scope creep like that. Like we don't use Trello really. I mean, some of the teams might use it internally just to manage it, but with the clients we use Jira, and the Jira boards, although clients do have access to the tickets, they're restricted into what in terms of what they can create, and
Right.
All requests have to come through the right channels, through our project managers and product owners, and they act as a buffer for between the client and the design and development team. So there's no unnecessary scope creep happening.
Yeah, I mean, with Trello, just recently I found, one of the clients adding additional cards, out of the blue, and having full-blown conversations in the card and asking questions and, dropping things like, passwords and usernames and things like that, and copying, pasting content from somewhere and just going really ridiculous with it, adding 50 megabyte worth of photography into a Trello card. It just blows everything up. And yeah, it can backfire, but I think you got to have the conversation with the client beforehand and just say to them that this is purely for tasks that we're setting up, and if we require your feedback in a card, we'll ask for your feedback.
Yeah. Do you also use Trello to then get feedback on designs, for example? Or
that varies.
The process for that?
I've been using various different types of tools for that. So InVision's a really good one. So once we've done the design work, we'll drop it into InVision and create a simple sort of prototype where you'll be able to go from page to page or carry out a user journey. So if you're adding a product to the basket and going to the checkout stage, we'll show that in InVision, and we can gather feedback through there. But just recently, we've started using another tool which is really good, but it's I think it's still in its beta stages. It's called Dropler, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but you can essentially upload all your design assets to that. So you can upload logo designs, you can upload your website page design, front ends, anything you like really, screenshots, whatever you want, high res, low res, and the client can then log in with their own username and password and a secure link, and then they can comment within there as well. So they can provide you feedback. So they can highlight a certain section of the page, and then they can type on there and give you feedback. Like Dropbox, very similar to how Dropbox works as well.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna have to send me a link. I'm having a quick search for it, but I don't think it's coming up with the right results.
Yeah,
so you can send me a link to that. I'll try it out.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's pretty good. That and InVision, they work really well.
Yeah, we mainly, like I said earlier, we mainly use InVision and Zeppelin as well. Zeppelin's good when you're handing off from designers to developers, because you get all the measurements and you get all the assets, laid out quite nicely, and you get the style guide with all the colors and typography as well, especially if you're syncing with your sketch documents as well. It does a really good job of that. So I quite like Zeppelin.
I have looked into it, and I did set up an account with Zeppelin, and there's just a lot there. There's just a hell of a lot there for someone like myself in my situation, where it's usually just me, and I might be working with a couple of other people here and there. But I think for you, it's Zeppelin is brilliant for the larger teams.
Yeah. So do you obviously you're using Trello, which is a Kanban style. So are most of your projects, do you approach them with this sort of agile methodology where you iterating often and doing little sprints, or do you have the traditional sort of waterfall approach to your projects?
I think everything that we're taking, all the projects that we're taking, do work in an iterative sort of format.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Kanban comes in and really suits the project work that I'm doing. And I think it works for everyone as well. The clients appreciate it as well. They think it's really professional that there's something like that out there, and it really blows their mind, and it makes their life easier. So, definitely, I haven't come across any project where we think that it's not going to fit, or it doesn't really work, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, most of ours are agile. We try and do that as much as possible. But there's one big project I worked on recently where the client themselves insisted they wanted to work in more of a waterfall approach. They wanted to have a long period of requirements gathering right at the beginning, and they wanted to really flesh out the whole project and try and basically think of everything before any design work even started.
Wow.
So this was like, I won't mention names, but it was for a utilities company. So I guess fairly traditional background. They've got a lot of processes in place which they want to stick to and they're used to. So not necessarily the easiest client to mold, I guess. But yeah, it was tough because we spent a couple of months, I think, just working on wireframes and just basically fleshing out what the project's going to be looking like and how it's going to work before any, even lines were drawn in Sketch. And then, there was a long design process because it was basically a form. We were building this multi-step form, which had about 15 steps to it. So quite a lot of screens and a lot of logic as well that had to be designed. And it wasn't until the whole form had been designed and all thought of that any of the actual development work started. And then, obviously, as most projects go, there's going to be changes. So it came to the development process, and then it was like, okay, that doesn't quite work. We need to go and update the designs again. And then this whole sort of cycle just started again. So should have been a 4 to 6 month project probably if it was agile, turned into almost a year and a half. Just really dragged out. I mean, we got there in the end, but it's just it just showed the importance of working agile and having this sort of iterative process where you design a bit, build a bit, design a bit, build a bit, and it was interesting. And let's just say it was interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. Yeah, if that happened to me, I'd sack the client.
Well, you can't always do that, can you?
No, you can't.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And when it comes to like, so when you're done with your project, let's say you're done with your design, and then you've handed off to your development team, and how do you then sort of hand off to your client then from that point?
So I make sure that on the design side, it's all signed off by the client. So every screen that they're going to see, that the users are going to see, is all signed off, and then that's passed on to the development stage where myself and I'll probably have someone working alongside me. We'll start coding, building the templates for WordPress for the actual website. Now we do this in a development environment, And so we'll create a subdomain which is hidden from public view. And what we'll do, we won't release anything to the client until we've fleshed out all the visuals onto WordPress, with actual templates. So what we don't want to do is start, putting stuff together and then give them a link to it, and then they start looking at it. And the first thing they'll say is, "Why isn't this done? Why is that, like that? Why that looks broken? The fonts are wrong. This is wrong."
Yeah.
And we always work in a mobile first approach as well. So the thing is, what we find is clients always look at desktop first. So that kind of puts a spanner in the works. So if we release, early, then we get all kinds of issues from the client because they don't look at mobile first. They always look at desktop.
And are they generally happy to wait?
Yeah, they usually are. So what we'll do is, first things first, we'll get the first page ready, and that'll usually be the homepage. We'll get that all fleshed out, looking, pixel perfect as it is in the design. And once each one of those templates is, ready to be viewed, we'll release them as a working site. In some cases, we'll do a prototype first. So, we'll create a setup in InVision where they can, have a play around with it. And that usually keeps them happy. So they know how it's going to look and how it's going to work and how everything's going to flow. And while they're having a play with that in InVision, we can, crack on with the development work. And then what happens at that stage is they'll usually come back to us and say, "Oh, we noticed something with, the buttons weren't clear enough, the call to actions weren't really that clear when viewing it as a prototype." So while we're developing, we can actually, implement those small fixes or small amendments as we go along. Yeah. That's how we work it.
Yeah. And do you have a lot of input from your clients when it comes to the design process? Or do they tend to trust your judgment?
Yeah. What happens, I used to get clients who would say to me, so they'll come on board and they'll say, "Oh, have you ever built a website for dental surgery before?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't. But built plenty of websites in different, sectors and industries. So it's not a problem. The question you should be asking is, can you build a website, and not for a particular, business or sector?" And I'll be like, no, we haven't. And then be like, "Well, we really want someone who's built a website for a dental surgery before." And then we'll say, "Send us some examples of websites that catch your eye and things that you like." And they'll send us links to the websites that were built, in the 90s and, really, really badly designed, unresponsive, just terrible. And then we kind of get the alarm bells ringing at that stage, and it's kind of like, okay, that's cool. I can maybe refer you to someone who can help you out, and we'll just leave it there. So I've kind of managed to get rid of those kind of clients, but I do still get people on that kind of level where they want to have their input and they want to, make suggestions, and it's you need to hear them out and listen to them. But at the end of the day, you're the professional. That's the way I see it. So, I'm trained in what I do. I spent, years at university studying human-computer interaction and why certain colors are used over other colors and why text should be a certain size and why websites should be laid out the way they are. And you pass that information on to the client and they kind of respect you for that. But, it doesn't matter what you say or do. They're always going to, try and get something in there, and it's sometimes you just have to let go and, just go with it.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes people don't know what they want until they see it as well. So, if someone says, "Oh, okay, I want a website for my dentistry," like you just mentioned, if the competition out there is all of a certain caliber, but you can bring something new and fresh to the table, then providing links to competitors or to other sites that you like may not always be the best option. Sometimes it's good to just start from a clean slate and just let someone approach it with their unique style. And there's obviously going to be some requirements that need to be met, and maybe some restrictions that will need to be considered. But you got to let the design team and let the developers do what they know best. And
I think so. And what we normally do as well is if we've agreed to take on a bespoke approach, the client tends to stick out of it and they'll steer clear of the design process completely because it's bespoke. They'll leave it to us and they'll know, okay.
Yeah, that's good. You want someone who's just, being the voice of the design, or, spearheading the project. Otherwise you're just going to have this design by committee where you've got, everyone in the team, the client, the developers, the project managers, all pitching in on how things should look and feel. But you definitely need a central point to sort of take charge and, listen to feedback, obviously, and incorporate what they can. But you definitely need
I think recently, like the big thing that's been creeping up recently, and I've been seeing it all over Twitter actually with friends of mine who are web developers and they run their own businesses, is the influx of digital marketeers who are now getting involved with web designers, and so what happens is this a scenario would be, I've built a website for a client, the website's all signed off, great, looks great, works great, and then all of a sudden the client decides to, he's been pitched by a Facebook marketing guy or a Google AdWords person, their ideas on how to improve the website and get them leads and traffic and et cetera, et cetera. And so the client will go ahead with that. And then what would happen is that digital marketing person will get hold of my details from the client and send me a list of things that they need changed on the website.
Okay.
So they'll say, okay, so we need 10 new landing pages with optimized for these keywords. And we also need a form on each page. And we need, 4 or 5 bits of call to action.
Call to action buttons everywhere, pop-ups, all of this crap and nonsense. And it's like, are you for real? Like, you have completely just ruined everything that, I've just worked on. And it's just crazy. And it's like, you can't really, there's not much you can do in that scenario. And no, there is a place for that sort of stuff in certain industries and certain types of product, but it's not a blanket solution for everything, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah, it definitely isn't. I mean, we think of all the solutions anyway. We think of the scenarios and the call to actions are all there. That's all taken care of anyway. But when you're talking about running a Google AdWords campaign where they might have 5 or 6 campaigns running, multiple ad groups and then multiple ads, then okay, they're going to need multiple landing pages. But it gets crazy with the marketeer who's probably using a tried and tested format. So, from their point of view, they're right. And they just assume that they can send me a list of things that, I'll be able to do without thinking about, okay, this is going to take time and effort and I'm going to have to quote the client on it. And it's going to cost the client X amount to make all these changes and amendments. So, it is pretty crazy. And the funny thing is that I provide digital marketing services as well. So it's like, why have you gone off with someone, who's just got in touch with you? It could be a case that, it might be a friend or they've probably promised that they'll go to them at some point. I get that. But, it does throw a spanner in the works, with these digital marketing people. It is crazy.
Yeah. I suppose we don't really get that as that issue as much in an agency because it is all sort of handled in-house. So that would be one of the services sold to the client at the same time as well, when the project is taken on. So it doesn't happen as often. So is there anything that you'd like to change about your process and how you go from idea to completion? Or do you see anything missing from your process at the moment?
I think good thorough testing is probably missing because what I'm finding is at the moment I'm getting quite a lot of work in, and two things actually. Actually spending proper time on creating bespoke design. Because I'm finding myself having to just roll out websites without spending a good amount of time on creating multiple versions of a design. So usually I'm kind of pitching to the client that it'll be bespoke design, but what we'll do, it'll be done in an iterative process. So we'll create, a design for you, take some feedback from you, and then we'll kind of make changes to that design until we're both happy with it.
Okay.
And we know it's going to work. But then, it's all rolled out pretty quick. We've got a framework in place in WordPress. We've got like a vanilla theme that we've created, and everything kind of just falls into place. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle. So we have a list of all the essential plugins that we require. And it's all kind of, it becomes mundane, I'll be honest with you. And if anything, I'd like to be able to spend more time, with the client discussing, their brand voice, their identity and how that relates to what they do and who they want to speak to, and get that through a design. And there's not much time to get that done. And then obviously that affects the quote, on the project, So a lot of guys out there, a lot of clients that we speak to, they always mention the keywords, I need a basic website. I need a simple website. And the alarm bells are ringing straight away. So they don't really want to spend any time on working any of that kind of stuff out. So
interesting.
Yeah. So putting some real time into that would be great. But the flow that I've got at the moment works really well. But, as soon as I take on, a designer, recruit someone, get them on board, then we'll be able to do that step properly and actually spend time between ourselves and work on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think for us in the agency, it's almost the opposite. Because the size of the projects is generally fairly large, and the budgets are fairly large as well. We tend to have a bit of luxury to spend a lot more time with the clients early on, and have lots of conversations. Sometimes there's too many conversations. You just want to crack on with things, but you may end up, just talking about things for the first couple of weeks, seemingly without any progress. But it's all progress, really. Every conversation is helping. Having lots and lots of conversations up front will cut down the amount of rework later on. So it may seem a bit not pointless, but a bit too much in the beginning, but it's all quite necessary. But for me, I think, one thing I'd like to change, especially in my particular setup, of process setup, is just because we are distributed, it'd be nice if we could just have a bit more time where everyone sits together and works collaboratively for a short while on the project, or a bit more long term as well. So that's probably the only thing I'd like to really change. But it's one of the things. It happens. It comes and goes, and it all depends on the client and their location, and that has a big influence on the team that gets used for the project as well. Because, like I said, we've got offices in the UK, Germany, and Croatia and Austria. So if there's a project for a client which is in Germany, chances are majority of the German team is going to be used on that project. So yeah, it's kind of driven by the client. I've been only really working on UK projects for the past year. So, and every now and then someone from one of the European teams will come over and come and sit with me. But most of the time it's just myself and the clients dealing with it, or people in the UK.
One question I've got for you: let's just say you're working on a project, right, and it's all signed off and it's all ready to go, then you've got a testing sort of phase, right, for this project.
Yeah.
Right. How is that done? How do you guys deal with testing? Like, I'm sure you've got like a massive department which carries that out, or is it outsourced?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not huge. We've got a QA team, so we'll have, all the developers will do an element of their own testing as they're developing anyway, right? We have some guidelines, and we have some things like browser support defined, and we'll have device support defined up. So if we know that the site has to work in IE11 because that's what the client uses, then the developers will make sure that it is tested in IE11 before it's even handed over to anyone. But then obviously we have QA as well, and the QA team will generally do a bit more in-depth testing. They'll test out very specific scenarios they'll based on user stories,
Right.
and they'll do a lot more device testing as well, physical devices, and then try and find anomalies and edge cases. And so there'll be a round of internal QA testing, and then we'll hand over like the first phase to the client, and the client will then do their own testing in a staging environment or some sort of environment, and then that will come back to QA, and then we'll go through a process of bug fixes and another release, and then it's until it's sort of the release passes those steps. So we'll go through a development release, and then normally a internal staging release, then an external staging release, and then finally onto production. So
right, okay,
mostly a 4-step process.
Bloody hell, that's huge. See, this is the thing, like with what I'm doing with the websites I'm building, the testing that I'm doing is it involves the client. So before we launch, the client will see the website in a staging environment where they can go through every sort of scenario, and they will click on every single link, they'll click on every single page. If it's an e-commerce website, we'll set up dummy products. We'll have like the dummy payment cards available, so they can go through the whole procedure and then see invoices come through via email. They can make sure the logo's on there, everything's branded properly. If there's push notifications set up, they want to see that working. If there's SMS set up, they want to see notifications come through. So they will literally spend a good few days, maybe a week, on sites of that scale, e-commerce sites especially. And then usually what we do is we'll go through it as well, and we might pick up on a few things that were missed out, or things that aren't working. It could be like a plugin's not working, or something that we've put together from scratch isn't really working as it should be. It should be working. We pick up on those kind of things, but we'll kind of do it in tandem with the client.
Okay,
that's how we'll do it. But for the smaller websites, it's literally a case of just going through everything. We're only really testing in modern browsers, to be honest. I don't deal with any older browsers, and mobile first is key as well. So we'll do all the standard kind of checks there, make sure all the inquiry forms are working as it should be. Maybe run the website through GTmetrix or Google PageSpeed, and just pick up on anything that might be bottlenecking anywhere, like large images and things like that.
Yeah.
Set up a CDN if we have to, if it's required. So we'll find out about all of that kind of stuff during that sort of testing phase. Because not all the websites need a CDN. That's what I'm finding anyway. But anything image heavy with lots of content, multiple style sheets in place, then we find that a CDN's got to be brought in, and we've got to test all of that as well. Make sure that's all working properly before everything's sort of rolled out. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about sort of dummy products and dummy content. One thing that we try and do is our sort of second round of staging, which we sometimes refer to as like pre-production, or try and mirror that to the production site as closely as possible. So it won't have dummy content in there. It'll have the actual content, and it'll be set up in a way where you can put real orders through as well with real credit cards and so forth. It's just basically a backup. That's what it essentially becomes then, because then you have your production site, and then you've got this other one, this pre-production, which is almost an exact mirror, unless someone goes and makes a change directly on the production site. Content might not be exact, but functionality should be an exact mirror. And that way, then, if the production site for any reason would ever go down, then you could quite quickly switch to the pre-production and make that the live site then, or take a copy from there, and you shouldn't lose too much content. So that's one of this big project that I was telling you about, the utilities company. That's kind of what we had. We had quite a few different environments. So we had our local dev environment, and then there was a internal local environment. So dev environment on individual machines, and then there was a dev environment internally on a single server, and then there was a hosted internal server, and then a hosted external server. It was about 5 steps, but it's a massive company. It's a massive utilities company, and they couldn't really afford any downtime. So it was important to get all those steps and thoroughly tested.
Yeah.
And just that's going to grow with the size of a project. It's just going to grow and grow. I'd hate to imagine how much testing is involved in releasing something on, let's say, I don't know, like Apple.com's website. When they release a new iPhone and they have to update the product page for the iPhone as soon as it's released.
Yeah.
There must be so much going on in the background in terms of testing for that, just to make sure, that all the images are correct and, the content is all going to be refreshed. You don't want anything cached locally. You've got to make sure that nothing is made visible to the public too soon. Leaks happen, but, and just checking, the checkout process and the configuration options. It's going to be so much, but yeah, it's just, I'm sure they've got a massive QA team. We've got generally on a project, we'll have a team of about 3 QA on most projects.
Right.
Yeah, between 1 and 3, depending on the size. And that's normally enough. It's normally enough to test out some browsers, test out all the browsers, test out all the devices.
Right.
Get it done in a fairly reasonable amount of time as well. It's normally a good enough QA team.
That's cool. Yeah, because I've been thinking about outsourcing that testing to people who specialize in testing websites and making sure, everything flows as it should do.
All right.
I have been thinking about it just to alleviate stress on myself and anyone else working on the project. So, I don't know what you think about that, but I've been looking for, I've Googled a few early this week.
Testing is a pretty big topic in itself. We could probably do something on that later on. Automated testing and unit testing.
Yeah.
Automation testing is something that I've been researching recently. I haven't got very far with it yet, but I know some guys at work, they do unit testing as well. And, our dev team is encouraged to write tests where possible. It's just one of those things. It's not always, priority number 1, but yeah, when it is, it does definitely cut down on QA time and it does speed up the process from development to release. So.
Okay. When you mentioned you're setting up multiple environments for the websites.
Say that again, sorry?
When you set up multiple environments for websites, so you've got like a test environment, staging, pre-production, and then production. I've only just started recently following that sort of concept. So before, it would literally be a local version of the website where it's all built, everything's sort of tested locally, and then it'll be shared with the client. And then when they're happy with it, it's pushed live. And then that's it. Then if there's only a live version of the site and then like a backups created of that, automatically, every day, which is all good. But then we started doing more complicated websites, which require constant changes, amendments, new features, new functionality. There's one particular website which we built is a number plate builder, and it allows people to go onto the site and create their own number plate. And this website is constantly requiring new plate sizes added to it. New character limits being imposed on certain plates. New types of finishes for the plate. So, there could be a smoked finish, there could be a 3D lettering, there could be 4D lettering and acrylic lettering. And it's just mind-blowing. And so this is probably one of the first websites that I've actually put through like 3 or 4 different stages now. So we have like a local version of the website, we have a live dev version of the website, and there's a staging version of the website, and then there's a actual live version of the website as well. And and we're running Git with that as well, so we've got version control on that as well. And that's the first kind of project, and it really does take it out of you when you're working on something that complicated. And so it's a case now for making a decision on, is that the standard now for every single website that I take on?
It might not necessarily need to be the standard for everything, but it's a good practice to have at least 3 sets. You've got dev, staging, and production. And I guess it depends on how you're hosting your site as well. I know I've hosted sites with Azure before, There is pretty simple to create a staging environment. Obviously, you've got to pay extra. You're paying for 2 servers essentially. If you use Netlify, have you ever used Netlify?
No, I haven't.
So Netlify makes it pretty simple as well. So it's good for, I suppose it's good for all sorts of sites, but especially for small sites, it's good because it's free. You can get free hosting from them, and it basically syncs up with your GitHub repository, and you can have it to auto deploy your master branch to a URL, which is how I've got a few small sites set up. But what you can do with Netlify is you can set it to build one of your branches as well. So suppose you got your master branch, you can create another branch called staging if you want, and you can have that as your intermediate branch. So you do all of your commits in whatever branches and then merge those into staging first. Staging then gets deployed to a separate server, a separate URL. And once you're happy with that, you then merge your staging branch into your master, and then that gets deployed to your live URL.
Right.
So that's one way you can set it up. Fairly simple.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, Netlify is really good. I mean, you should check it out. They're not sponsoring the show, but maybe one day they will.
I'm using Deploy HQ to do my deployment, using SourceTree and then development in VS Code. But, it works really well. It's pretty cool.
Okay, I'll show you some stuff on Netlify after the show when we go offline.
Brilliant.
It's good. Yeah, all right. Well, I think we should pretty much wrap it up there. We're sort of approaching our time. It's been interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about this sort of thing again in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
As it's changed, as your team grows, and see how things have changed for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're recruiting at the moment, so hopefully do some interviews next week and see who comes on board.
Yeah, it'd be good. That'd be good. All right. Well, thank you for listening to the show. Be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player, and you can feel free to drop us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you can leave a review. You can follow the show on Twitter at InspectFM, and you can find the show notes for this episode and all the previous episodes, the full archive, over at inspect.fm. You can follow myself on Twitter at Ajay Karwal, and yours is
It's at Urban Bindi. You can also find my Delve agency account on there as well, which is at We Are Delve. Okay, cool. I'll put those in the show notes as well. But yeah, other than that, we will catch you in the next episode. Nice one. See you then. All right. See ya. Bye-bye.